All right, welcome everybody. Today is March 11th, 2020. This is the Kubernetes SIG architecture production readiness subproject meeting. And happy to have you all here. Let's take a look at the agenda. Okay. So, agenda today is to look at some of the survey results from the survey we did a while back. A few other comments, I guess, before we get started. This is our first meeting, I think, since the Contributor Summit and the KubeCon were postponed. We were going to do something in the Contributor Summit to discuss this program, but that's postponed. It's not clear to me yet when that's going to happen. So anyway, at this point, we'll just assume we're going to still do it later. With that, if there are no questions, we'll jump into the survey results. I've been working on putting together some information. Let's see, I can make this a little prettier. All right. So some of the questions we wanted to answer from this were, just to get a general idea of things, but here are some of the questions we've discussed in the past. So I think I've answered most of these, but there's still a few more that I haven't quite gotten to yet. But let's just go through it, and then we'll discuss things as we go. And if somebody else can take notes in the agenda, maybe directly, that would be helpful because I can't do both at the same time.
Sure, I'll type.
Thank you. So for general, the way, I guess it doesn't show you the overview of this. I don't know. This tool is new to me. But I can share this also, the report itself. But if we look in the edit, I can show you the pages I created. Oh my God. So these are the basic things we'll talk about today that I've got down so far. So some demographics around who took the survey, the responses we got, based on the role and cluster, number of clusters and number of nodes under management. Some information about the different versions, some information about minor version and patch version rollback, some information about GA data disablement, some information on alpha enablement, and some discussion of the troubleshooting questions. Those are the have you used events, logs, metrics, how recently. I didn't get to the monitoring tools section, which is another kind of bigger area that we need to explore. But let's go with what we have, and we can refine our questions as well if these aren't giving what we need. Now, a few things to note is, there are like 78 records, which is not terrible, but it's not a huge number of responses, so it's hard to slice and dice a lot, particularly the very large size clusters. There are not a lot of responses for, so I guess we'll see that. So one of the questions we asked was whether people are DevOps, development, or operations, just to give a kind of idea of what the community looks like. I'm not sure. I don't really slice anything else by that, just on this page. So looking at based on the responses, how many clusters folks have under management, you can see that most of the people responding have a small number of clusters under management, with just 1 to 10. That's over here. I didn't give the numbers here. I can actually add that. I think there's a way. Well, I thought there was a way. Oh, those are percentages, that's why. So it doesn't give the actual, I don't have the numbers in this chart, but since there's 78, right, you can see that 20% or say 30% of that is what, 24. If we, 24 with more than 10 clusters. Breaking that down by nodes, so we had two separate questions. We had a question on number of clusters under management and number of nodes under management. So we can see that most of those folks also have between 10 and 100 nodes under management. So we're looking at, I guess, a higher number of I guess I don't know. To me, small in comparison to what we have, but of course we're very unusual at Google, an unusual group. But basically, end users, which is what we'd like, which is good. The other thing we sort of have discussed is that that's what we want the focus to be. That we don't think that the Googles and Red Hats of the world necessarily will benefit from anything that comes out of this program, but really we want to make sure that the operators, the end users, are benefiting as much from the program as we can. So that's kind of the focus of what we want to do anyway. So that's not bad. That really the vast majority are in the 10 to 1,000 nodes under management. So later I slice some of the things. I basically take off the tails, the less than 10 nodes and the more than 1,000 nodes, and just look at those two in a few of the places to get an idea of how those two variables come together. So not unexpectedly, the more clusters you have, the more nodes you have under management, but this kind of gives a rough measure of the size of individual clusters on average here, although it's pretty rough. So any questions on any of this? Okay, that gives some context. So let's look at the versions that that people are running. So the versions here. So we asked a question that was basically, what versions do you have running? 110 and earlier, up through 117, and of course it's not mutually exclusive. So what I did is map those into the oldest version running for a given respondent and the newest version running for a given respondent, which gives us a little more data out of it, or at least more digestible data. So you can see that the look sort of mid tier here. Let's see, these are in order based on the counts. So
hang on, John. Have I misread the titles, or you use the same title twice? Oldest version under management.
Misread the titles. No, I used the same. This is supposed to be clusters.
Gotcha. Thanks.
So for those with very few clusters, a wider range of versions, interestingly, of oldest version. There's more of those people, so that's probably why. I'm not sure what we can glean from this, other than we can see that,
adoption is not. Oh, that's oldest.
This is oldest version on, yes, oldest version. So basically, what old versions do you have lingering around and you haven't pulled up? There's a surprising 10% of folks have have 1.10, and look at this. This is surprising, right? People have this old a version completely out of support. That's like a third of the people with between 100 and 1,000. And then it jumps up to 113 and 115. I don't know. Seems a little surprising to me that because that's a pretty old version, but I guess people just don't want to move. They may have two clusters of like that. Who knows? And newest versions actually looks better to me in that there's fewer options. So people are moving up. There's somebody stuck way back at 110 or earlier here, but for the most part, looks like, you know, the last 3 releases.
Is that a typo in the should that be newest version versus nodes?
God, you're way too pitching all my mistakes. All right, thank you. Appreciate it, actually. Any comments here? Not too surprisingly, given that 117 was pretty new when we put this out, the largest group is 116.
Something doesn't look right with the chart. I am surprised that if you have more than 10,000 nodes under management, anyone would have the newest level at 110. I'm wondering if that chart.
Yeah, this looks like it's the same as that. This is a bug. Thank
Okay.
you. Your eagle eyes here. I need to proof all these better. All right. Okay.
I like that a lot better.
That looks a lot better. Yeah, this one looked pretty good, and so now
This
looks
this is much better.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So yeah, 116 and 117. 116 here, but yeah, there is surprisingly somebody here with a pretty large cluster, because this is the same. This lists like one person. One. I think it's one respondent has a large cluster stuck back on an early version.
You mind scrolling up just for a second to the oldest version again, so we can look at the between 10 and 10,000 nodes under management and compare. Wow, so overall they do span a lot of versions.
Yeah, there's really a lot of versions span. Might be interesting to look at the span of version, the distribution of how many respondents are running what number of versions.
True.
Let's write that down.
I've got it.
Well, you got it. Okay, right. That's right here. And my pen's dead anyway. Okay. Okay. Anything else we want to think about on this, or further analysis we want to do to try and understand this? Okay, let's look at minor version rollback. Now here's, again, I think I mentioned it on my last call, but we really kind of made a mistake. We didn't ask them which versions they rolled back, which is something we're going to have to fix. But here's where I'm slicing it in 2 ways. One, this is for all respondents, and then this is taking off the tails. So it's taking off the folks with more than 1,000 nodes or less than 10 nodes. Not much difference. All right.
I don't know. Those look. The percent rollback in stage and production changed quite a bit.
Yes. Same pattern, but yes, they did change. Not that many people have rolled back in production, and the large ones here. These are the 2 that came out of that. That's why you see that. But there's the count. The absolute count of those is very low, which is why it looks more dramatic in this one, where it's a percent of that category versus a percent of the whole. So what I thought was interesting, I mean, this shows probably, I mean, this is a small group, but maybe need more best practices in that group around not just running everything in prod, but I guess if it's small enough, they don't care.
Did you slice by the reasons? We had a reason people could select.
Yeah, I'll get there. Yep. And then based on number of clusters under management, when you've got more than 1,000 clusters, you've done it. Although it's not that many people again. So here are the reasons. The reasons of those who rolled back, then these are the reasons. Far and away, individual components, some components were failing. The cluster didn't completely go down. It wasn't like a cascading. The way I interpret the question, and hopefully other people did, the people answering it did, is that basically complete cluster failure means like there's some sort of cascading failure that just like causes massive, takes the whole thing out, as opposed to like, oh my, this particular, I don't know, this, the scheduler or this particular controller or this particular, if it's the API server, that probably takes the whole cluster out, but other things, far and away, that's the biggest reason. I think what that means for us is better integration testing, better testing, because I'm sure those components didn't fail in isolation. They failed in combination with a new version of the API server or what it was. I think we probably want to go to some of these people, and we've got email addresses, like I said, for almost half of these people, and start to talk about which specific. Are you talking to us, Wojciech, or somebody else? Must be somebody else.
No, sorry, I was talking to my son. Sorry.
No, that's okay, not a problem. I just wanted to make sure you didn't think you were off mute. So we probably want to go talk to people and see whether it's what specific components they were talking about, and was it like, say, a version skew between components that caused the failure? Like what was the, we need to investigate that in more detail, I guess, would be the note I would take out of that. But it's notable.
I'd be interested in knowing whether they clustered as well.
Yeah. All right, then for patch versions, very similar pattern of the data.
Are you surprised that it appears more people have rolled back patch versions than minor versions?
Do you think it's more? I didn't.
Sorry, I saw 9.5. I see. It's a percentage of the number of people who answered the question.
Well, it's a percentage of the respondents in that category. So, so here it's 15% of everybody. I think I may have excluded people that didn't answer the question. Actually, I don't think I did.
Have a look at patch version rollback by nodes under management. 101 to 1,000. I see 9.5 rolled back in production. And if you flip back to the minor, I think it was 4 point something, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
That surprises me. Does it surprise you?
Yeah, because patch versions should be safer. Right? And look at that, yep. 20% have rolled back a patch version. But it's also safer to roll back a patch version. Like it may be that there first of all, there are more patch versions. So you're more likely, right? You do more patch upgrades than you do minor version upgrades. So you're more likely to have to roll to
I don't do, well, okay, I guess I do. I guess I upgrade minor versions once and I upgrade patch versions like 5 times or something.
Exactly, right? So you're doing them more frequently.
Still, I'm really surprised we have problems with them.
Right. So what are the problems we have with them? The problems, same problem. Which is interesting. Like, yeah, that's patch. That's patch.
Yeah, that's weird.
Like, that is weird. That's another one I think we can explore more. And we could put on here a metric that looks at, that compares the minor and patch to each other. Right now I'm looking at patch broken down by clusters and nodes, and but compare them to each other because that is an interesting. I mean, yeah. Look at the,
yeah, I wasn't expecting that at all.
So that's an interesting point we need to investigate. Is our patch qualification not good enough, right? Are we doing more in patches than we really should be? And or not qualifying them well enough.
Is it possible that like it's not necessarily related to like what we are doing in Kubernetes, but some providers or something? I know that in GKE we sometimes enable some things in patch releases. So I can imagine that like it may happen that some cloud providers enable something in patch releases and that actually breaks something. And because of that, people need to revert or roll back like the
Do customers of cloud environments even get the choice?
They do,
Okay.
at least in GKE. At least they can, like, I'm not sure they can roll back minor version, but I think they can roll back patch version in GKE.
So this again becomes something we go and we talk to folks, and this is the first time we're doing the survey, so we're in some ways discovering better questions to ask. So we need to understand this. Maybe it's too broad of a category too. Maybe we, maybe why it's it's selected so many times. But yeah, understanding why patch is rolled back more often. I mean, there is something to that. It's an operation that's done more often, so it's an operation that has the potential to be undone more often, I think. But I'm not sure how to get at that in a question.
Yeah, not an easy way.
Yeah. Okay, disabling beta. So G and beta, I've got like 3 slides on this. So let's, this is kind of overall GA and beta policies. Almost everybody allows, all GA, and oddly enough, these are identical, and I checked them multiple times, but they were identical. The allowing beta and allowing all GA, almost everybody does.
And that was in prod, right?
That is, how did we word that question? Because I don't, must be, yeah, I think that was in prod. I think the way we worded the question. Are developers in production?
Okay. Yeah, that was how I thought we did it. Okay.
All right.
You're on the wrong page. Oh, you know you're on the wrong page.
Yeah, no. Just Pranav is suggesting something here, so I assume you can. I don't know. Can you see my group chat or no? I guess not. All right. So let's see. So Pranav's comment was, is there a way we can differentiate between clusters running stateful and stateless? We can't.
No, I don't even know that a lot of the cluster admins would know what their users are running.
Right. So it might be hard to get that data. Okay, so GA and beta, yeah. So in production, yes, and it goes up slightly actually in that. I think I don't know if there's a breakdown by. So again, all right. Let's see. This one's a little hard to parse. So disabled beta in dev stage prod, disabled GA in dev stage prod.
That's pretty low. 10%.
Yeah, these are percentages, so it is quite low. It seems to be relatively rare, and slightly more common. But with dev, we honestly don't care that much about.
Yeah, but it's weird.
Yeah, why would you bother? I mean, I guess you might if you just don't want your developers to use it, but why would you do it in dev and not in?
Yeah,
Oh, well, I'll bet it's people doing it for testing purposes,
maybe.
right? So disabling GA in um, in prod is extremely rare. So disabling beta reason. So the orange. Oh no, nobody disabled beta for testing. Interestingly, so primary reason is the feature didn't work as expected. So this is of the ones that disabled it, 40% of them did it for that reason in this sweet spot here. For GA, scalability, component failure, bad feature.
What are the absolute numbers of people who disabled GA components?
It's quite small. Maybe we can see it here. I think this will have it actually. Oh, that's yeah. This is the one I wanted.
I asked because it's hard to do. I mean, well, it depends on the feature, but like you end up finding the flag that'll turn something off, or I guess big enough clusters will patch the product. But
okay, here we go. This is kind of a lot here. You were asking about. Actually, let me query this one. This is a little bit better. Why is my scroll not there? I don't know why it doesn't. With tables, it lets you.
it can be something we look up later, I guess.
It'll just take a second. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, it's fine.
Okay, so you said disabled
GA.
Disabled GA. You see, it's very small numbers.
Okay. So, yeah, I don't think we need to.
Yeah, exactly.
GA appears to be pretty stable then.
Yes. And all right, where were we? So yeah, so I think disabled GA is rare enough that there's probably 3 here because it's 33%.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm taking away from it is that our GA actually functions pretty darn well in clusters.
Well, this is disabling a particular feature in GA, which, like you said, is hard to do. I think that a better measure of that question is rollback. And the fact that this many people have been rolling back, again, though, these are small, they're round percentages, so there's probably, we could look at absolute numbers. I should probably put those on at some point. I think in general that's probably true, but like, I'm not sure that this is the best thing to measure that by. Okay, we've got it more sliced by so by nodes under management here. Larger ones seem to actually enable the beta more, probably because, well, that may be the general policy versus the specific clusters. So if they have at least one cluster, they may, I don't know. It's not clear to me why, but the numbers aren't that different that it matters. Okay, so disabling beta, large organizations have disabled these things much more likely than other ones. This is similar information. It's just before we looked at only these 2 versus all. So I'm not sure if there's anything new here. Again, I wonder what the absolute number is there. All right. And then also sliced it by number of clusters under management. It's a really quite a similar pattern.
Yeah, all right. Based on this, I can see that basically no one knows how to disable a GA feature. It's the only real explanation. So there you go.
Right. Look at, interestingly, this small group is just, wow, one person's probably so, yeah, exactly. I think nobody knows how to disable a GA feature, right? Because they're not feature gates in general, right? So I don't know how to disable a GA feature. Okay, now slicing and dicing the same information, because you were wondering, you mentioned, David, about do people who run newer versions, are they more likely or less likely to disable or to allow? And actually, this is pretty nice. The people with the oldest version of since 1.13, all of them allow all GA and beta, whereas prior to that, there were a fair number who limited that. This is a little bit, I would call, I don't know, wishy-washy correlation, but because are you still hearing me?
Yeah, I can see how it's a little wishy-washy because you don't actually know which version they disabled or enabled on.
Exactly. But what this is saying is if we exclude versions 1.12 and earlier, people who are running versions 1.12 and earlier, they all say that they allow which is meaningful, I think.
Yeah.
For those who have disabled a beta feature, or prod or GA feature, interestingly, disabled GA and prod is people running their oldest is 1.17. I'm surprised we have anybody running. Maybe that's 1.16. No, it probably wouldn't show up even. I think we can click on it and see. Oldest 1.17. There's actually somebody running oldest 1.17.
That lucky person.
Yeah, exactly. Who the hell is that? Okay. So there is those running oldest 1.16 have done disabling, but there's also something that makes it even wishier-washier is somebody running 1.16 may have been running things for 4 years and they may have done it 2 years ago. Right, so it's a little hard to draw a conclusion from that. This isn't saying that they did it in their currently running set of clusters with the current versions they're running. The question was, have you ever done it?
But
so
I like the reasons here, though. The fact that they've changed over time.
Yeah, let's see. Bad feature. Yeah, there were a lot more reasons here. And then here, I don't know. I'm questioning whether we can draw a lot of conclusions from it because of that. Because of that wishy-washiness. Scalability. Component failure, and then a bad feature. I have the same thing with my newest version, but I don't know that it has any. No, maybe the comparison of the two has meaning. I don't know what to draw from this. Those whose newest version is 1.17.
Yeah, it's hard.
You know what it might mean? It might mean that the people who newest version are 1.17 at the time we ran this survey are the people who aggressively go to the next version. And so they've had to do all this stuff because they've been doing for the last 3 years, they've been aggressively going to every new version.
That's right. For the last 3 years, they've been aggressively going. And so in the past, they've had to, okay, all right, that's not useful. We'll skip.
It's not useful, right? I mean, I'm just sort of trying to understand what we can draw, right?
We can draw that we need to ask better questions.
Yes, I think that's what we can. I think that's the conclusion we can draw.
Well, I mean, I'll be honest. This is basically my first attempt at trying to gather this information. And
oh yeah, it's not easy, and we have to learn. Alpha enablement. All right, alpha enablement. We have. This is overall. I guess I didn't slice this one. Oh, this one predates the. I didn't slice off the tails and give us a number for the ones with the tails sliced off. But we do have a.
Still terrifying.
This one?
Yeah.
It is kind of terrifying. And look at this. In this sort of 57%. That is deeply concerning.
I guess, or an indication that it's really remarkably stable.
So if you go to beta, that people have years to adapt. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or you mean stable? You mean stable, not functional. You mean stable, like as doesn't crash the cluster.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. But my concern with alpha features, I mean, one is crashing things or not working. The other is building on top of APIs that are going to change potentially.
Or get removed.
Exactly, or get removed. So.
Do we have things lingering in alpha? I guess as a question to come out of this is, do we have things lingering in alpha?
Yeah, let's ask that question. You have that kept to not let things linger in beta, but we probably
I actually was thinking about it when you showed me the previous set, and I was saying to myself, I just need to resurrect that and go ahead and push through, get that merged.
Yeah, and merge. It should be graduation.
Telling me.
Yeah, it should be graduation through stages, not just beta, right? Not just beta to GA. Like it needs to move from alpha. I think we talked about that in the comments. That it needs to move from alpha too, but they need enough time to get feedback. And one thing I was thinking about, one thing I was thinking about with respect to that is, we probably should provide some tools to help teams do that. So that might mean, like, we're talking about revising a lot of the CAP functionality. And if the CAP is known to be in alpha, the feature in alpha, there may be some structured ways we can help people gather data through these forms or whatever. Because right now, like, what do? You put it in alpha, you put it out there, and you hope somebody like contacts you, right? And that's very passive way to gather data. So I'm trying to think about it, whether there's a way that we as an organization could offer some things to prompt people, or so even just like here's how you should collect feedback, and give some guidance there. I think that might help. Anyway, tangent. Notably, there aren't that many there aren't that many answers here, but none of them, the people who manage a lot of clusters, want anything to do with enabling alpha in production. Okay, so this is troubleshooting broken down by the number of nodes under management. So basically, the way this question was asked, go to the top. Have you used Prometheus metrics in the last month, quarter, year, more than a year, or never? And then some people didn't answer too, which is where the null comes from. So I find it, I guess, a little troubling, but that there's so many with never using metrics, but on the other hand, like I'm not surprised that, you know, as you move to the right in this chart, it goes down. So in that sense, it's not that surprising. But to me, the number of people who actually are using logs is kind of surprising, and this to me is like, actually I'm surprised this is not higher.
You're surprised events are not used more?
I mean, yeah, because what's the first thing you do when some pod's not coming up, right?
Well, so I guess my workflow normally runs use metrics to find something that has a problem, use events to see if it's obvious what that problem is.
Exactly.
Use logs if all my other options.
Right. Exactly. But what we're seeing is kind of the opposite. Almost, yeah. Right? Where, like, let's look at this one. It's 71%, 66%, 52%. Right? I would expect the opposite,
yeah,
because you first start with metrics, right?
I think regarding events, also the important thing is that they have a TTL. So if you are debugging something like half a day later or day later, or even like 6 hours later than it happened, you probably will no longer have those events. So
or you have an event that has a count of a bajillion.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is surprising. I wonder what we want to do about that. Like whether we should try to make logs better, or we should try to emphasize the other workflows. Is our workflow really better?
Our workflow is good for large.
It is, but you're right. That is pretty biased.
I could imagine. So you know, metrics hopefully will get you more proactive.
Can you slice this by role? I mean, not like on the fly right here,
yeah.
but
Yes,
maybe that would tell us
that's
what we want to, like,
yeah. Take a note of that, and that might give us more. And we can actually we can filter out certain roles. Like if we want to say, okay, let's filter out devs, for example. Devs are going to have a really different workflow because they're working on some specific thing, than operators or even DevOps. But like, can we look at just operations, you know? And then we might see something more like what we're expecting.
Yeah.
So my only other one is the same thing with clusters under management, which this is actually quite surprising that anybody with that many clusters under management isn't, you know, is looking at metrics that rarely.
Yeah.
That's probably one person.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah,
lucky guy. His clusters just work.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, apparently that person's clusters just work because look, there's no they don't use logs either.
He is probably the guy who is the oldest cluster on 117.
Probably. All right. That's all I've got so far. So if we look at some of these questions, we want tools by troubleshooting tools. Yes, I didn't get into the monitoring tools yet. Mm-hmm. It seems not really. This is relatively unusual.
Yeah, that definitely adds fuel to the KEP, and I will go ahead and prioritize that in 119 and get that merged, because it basically tells us that our beta is treated as GA, and we have to make that stop, or we have to just promote it to GA, right? I mean, that would solve the same thing.
Right. I mean, we suspected that, right? Because it's enabled by default, and other than beta in the, in the API group or whatever, like, what do you know?
Yeah.
This is actually usually components. Yeah, disabling beta is rare. Scary number of people enable alpha in production. That's something I'm not sure what to do about.
Next time we should ask which alpha features they enable.
Okay. That's going to be a long, whatever. We need some distinction between like I wish I don't want the survey to be so hard to answer that people don't answer it. But like really, we need to know which versions some of these answers go with.
Yeah. Maybe we could rephrase it as which versions do you use, and then maybe which versions will you answer these questions about? Like, we have a series of follow-ups, and if you want to answer it for all of them, do that, but otherwise answer it for your most frequent one, maybe. Yeah. I don't know how interactive the survey can be.
I don't either. I don't think it's like super complex.
Choose your own adventure.
Exactly. I don't think but you can just put it in the words. You can just say, in version this, did you do any of these? In version this, did you do any of these? Like we talked about with rollback. Did you roll back 117 to 116? Did you roll back 116 to 115? Did you roll back? We can ask those questions.
Yeah.
So who is enabling alpha and prod? It looked like everybody almost, just except for the very biggest operators. And who is disabling beta? I don't think we got a super clear signal.
There were so few of them that it was just impossible to tell.
So that's what I got so far. And it sounds like you took a bunch of notes. And so I can do a little more work on that. And I think we should just put together a report of some kind, a summary that we can read out to the larger SIG Arch soon, once we have.
Yeah, I think so too. I bolded a few things that stood out to me. I have several notes, and you can read through and see if it matches your thoughts.
Okay, I'll check it out after. I'm actually my battery's running out. So, do we have anything else we want to discuss today, or shall we call it 5 minutes early?
I'm good.
You good? Everybody else?
I'm good.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I think we got some useful information out of this. I think we can do better with our next survey, and we can also salvage this to some extent by going back and actually talking to the people. And so we'll maybe put together a plan for that too. Once we have a really clear idea of the specific questions we need to answer, we can go talk to them.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.